And welcome to Meet the Writers. I'm Georgina Godwin. My guest today is an award-winning novelist, screenwriter and an essayist. Born in Scotland, he's published 8 novels and a collection of short stories. His first novel, Swung, was adapted to film and was a finalist for 4 international film awards. He won the Scottish Book of the Year in fiction for Close Your Eyes, and in 2019 his book Mina X won the Saltire Society Literary Award for Fiction Book of the Year. That's sort of like Scotland's Booker Prize. Irvine Welsh has described this author as the eminent fiction writer of our times. Well, his latest book is For Emma. It's his 9th and his first work of science fiction, and we'll come back to that term. It follows a father grieving the death of his brilliant-minded daughter in an AI brain experiment gone wrong. Tormented by her death, he looks for answers, spiralling into his last days before committing an act of terrorism. It's a novel of surviving grief and of asking about the future of technology and society. It's really a novel about the meaning of life. Ewan Morrison, welcome to Meet the Writers.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I'm a big fan of your show as well. I love the way you get to the core of what makes us want to write and want to read.
Well, thank you very much indeed. What did make you want to write?
Well, so there's a thing in the book where Emma, of the title, is she's the why child. So she always asks why, like many little children do of their parents. And I've been grappling with the big whys for most of my life, actually. So I was raised in a kind of hippie experiment. My parents lived in the far, far north of Scotland, and they ran this folk festival, invited poets along, and it was a real kind of hippie thing, and they had big beliefs and big ideals. And when that collapsed as I was growing up, I was left with all these big why questions. You know, why did the hippie dream die? Why is there so much suffering? Why does depression exist? Why are people demotivated and lost? And so finally, with this 9th book, I got to have a child who managed to manifest all those questions, the why questions, which have bothered me through 9 books now. And also, Emma and her father are people who suffer from depression, and I wanted to write a book that was really about intergenerational coping with depression. A father's fear that he's passed his depression on to his daughter, and how crushing that can be as well when depression manifests, and how we deal with that. So.
I mean, within the book, we see that you are taking many strands from your own life. You have a father that drinks, for instance, which I understand you did in real life. The mother is a hippie.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit more about that hippie experiment. It sounds extraordinary.
Well, if you were to take a car north and drive for 16 hours, you would have come to the small town on almost the north coast of Britain, where my parents decided to set up shop. So the further you go out in Britain, you go towards Wales, you get little hippie experiments that happen there. The further north you go in Scotland, you have, the hippie experiment in Findhorn, the Findhorn Foundation, and then way up on the north coast, there was a little kind of enclave of people going back to nature and making pots and all the rest of it. My parents were more involved in the sort of cultural aspect of all that kind of thing, and at the time, because
your mother was a singer, your father was an artist.
She was a folk singer, so she was like there's this wonderful portrait of her that someone painted of her looking the spitting image of Joan Baez singing to the waves, and so I grew up in this working class town where my parents were the hippie freaks, and my dad he would walk about in his sandals and with a loud hailer going, "Come and meet the poets in the pub," and many local people really sort of hated him. So.
And that must have been very kind of embarrassing for you as a child.
Well, it was horrible, actually, in terms of I got a sense that the values of your family can be at odds with society. So my sister and I were fairly traumatised by the bullying that we experienced when we were growing up. I developed a stutter, which I had for 3 or 4 years, which I'm now abundantly, over and making up for lost time. But so that not fitting into society, so my parents didn't fit in and we didn't fit in to the schooling system, whatever. I guess that's why I've always written about outsiders, people who are caught outside the limits of society, in all the books, whether it's about swingers or New Age culture and Close Your Eyes, or a cult in Nina X. or survivalists in How to Survive Everything. It's always people are pushed to the edge of society who don't really fit in.
Talking about the stammer, I mean, I think you say in the book, because she has a stammer for a while too, that very bright children often do it to make themselves seem less sure, less bright, if you like.
Well, I think it's the mind. Certainly, Emma's kind of stutter that she has in the book, it's because her mind's racing too fast and her tongue is literally trying to catch up. Also, she's a couple of years ahead of the other kids in school because she is so bright. And so she gets bullied because of that as well. So the bullying, the self-consciousness over the words that are in your mouth and in your head can cause kids to trip up over what they're saying, and then they get into a self-consciousness spiral, which makes the stuttering worse.
Now, you went to art school, you got a degree in art documentaries, you won the dissertation prize, and you've made documentaries, but you've also been a member of several organisations that you later have described as cults. Tell me about that.
Well, I think because of my very idealistic childhood that I had, I was searching for, another big belief system as I moved through my 20s. So I was an active member of the Socialist Worker Party, these people that try to sell newspapers on the streets. A little known fact about them is that they hold their annual Taking Over the World conference with about 100 people in Butlins. It's extraordinary. And when I was there, this goes way back, probably 1989 even, just before the wall fell. I remember saying, Butlins, the red coats, the red flag, is there a connection?
No, it's just a holiday camp.
It's just a holiday camp, yeah. So I was involved with them, and they got accused of cult-like behaviour. I was involved with this humanist society that was operating in the UK, and both were just really, absorbed with this notion of total change of the world and with recruitment. So both of their strategies were just to get more and more and more and more people to join. And then we'll sort out what we're going to do about it afterwards. And that's one of the signs of cult or cultic behaviour. Yeah.
And of course, we see this come through in your work. But before we get to your books, I want to know about that switch from television, from writing for the screen and also directing to finally sitting down and writing your novels. Yeah,
no, that's an interesting and maybe long story, but I'll try and keep it brief. So after winning quite a few short film prizes, and I was headhunted for a job over in New York, and I was developing a feature film over there, and it sort of dragged on, and we weren't getting anywhere with it. And then the company I was with went bust. I'd moved over there with my family and had big plans for living and working in America, and I burned quite a few bridges in the UK to get there as well. So when that fell through, I found myself freshly divorced and having to move back to the UK and having to decide what my actual possessions were that I was going to. And I threw away my CDs, my books, and most of my clothes. But what I did keep was a stack of notepads that had been following me around since art school. Because it became a habit for me to write in these black leather-bound notepads over the years. And I realised when I got back to the UK and I had almost nothing in terms of possessions and no real future, that I'd actually been writing short stories for about 10 years without realising it. They were all sketches for short films. So my first book of short stories came from what I found in those notepads, and also just from the daily act of writing in notepads. Extraordinary stuff, because it really kept its value for you and allowed you to really reinvent yourself. Is that what it felt like? Oh, for sure. I mean, I think I'm one of these people who, because I am someone who suffers from depression and I have to fight it. And I find that writing really helps me battle it. It's usually when I'm finished a novel that I fall into depression. But I think there's something hugely redemptive about, and hope-giving about the act of writing. I'm certainly someone that clings to that, who's dependent on that. So I have to have my little black notebooks everywhere I go. Let's talk about the pandemic and your book, Nina X. You did write it before the pandemic. I wrote everything apart from, I slotted in the pandemic element of it. I had the survivalist thing. I had a different end of the world scenario. Your books are wide and varied, but there is a dark theme that goes through most of them. And really something quite frightening here. And we'll get to why For Emma is so completely terrifying. But first of all, How to Survive Everything, which is your book beforehand, basically predicts
the pandemic. Tell us about the book and also your own experience in surviving COVID.
So I think it was 2014, 2015. My wife, Emily, and I, she's a scriptwriter, we were given a project with National Geographic to do a one-off television special called American Blackout. And it was about what would happen in American society if the power went down and how this could spiral out of control. And we were given, because it was National Geographic, we were given access to documents from the American government, from the CDC, from the Department of Collapse Studies at Columbia University. Who knew that such a thing even existed? 3 ring-bound folders of the procedures that America goes through if there's some kind of systemic collapse, whether it's grid down or pandemic or everything. So once we finished that film and it was made and it became part of the survivalist canon, I thought, I have to write a book about survivalists because I've got all this material. Now, which kind of end of the world scenario am I going to do? Oh, I'm not quite sure, but I'll start writing the book anyway about a family of survivalists, and the sort of pivot in the story is that a father abducts his 2 children and doesn't tell his wife, his ex-wife. So she's left out of the survivalist plan, which is a safe house that's in the middle of nowhere, that's heavily armed and fortified with bunkers and all the rest of it. So he steals his own kids. So all of the procedures of lockdown and everything were in the book from the actual studies that came from the CDC and the whole process of the involvement in military type behaviour and controlling where you can go and where you can't go. So we knew about that a few years before the pandemic actually came out. And I was still faffing about really on like, is it going to be an economic collapse? Well, that's not really big enough. Is it going to be oil? All the oil runs out. And then one day we were watching the TV and we saw 3 cases of this unknown disease had been reported in China. And my wife and I looked at each other and we thought, oh, that's it. So we packed up swiftly, knowing that the pandemic would happen. Within a couple of days of that, we were a couple of weeks ahead, and we went out to a little place in the country, and I started feverishly reworking the book to make that the slotted in end of the world scenario that was going to trigger all of this panic with this survivalist family. So in a sense, 90% of the book is really just about how survivalists cope with some world-changing event that's beyond their safe house. And
would you say you are a survivalist?
I think I'm a terrible survivalist because I'm a coward and I'm lazy and I haven't got enough space for storage. You've got to have a lot of storage space, and every final chapter of I'm a terrible gardener as well, so you've got to be a good gardener if you're going to be a proper survivalist or a prepper. But every final chapter in every book of survivalism is weapons. And it'll start with something like a description like, it's all very well that you have your stash and you have your garden, but how are you going to protect them when all of those who are unprepared for the cataclysm realise they haven't got food and supplies? You will need 12-gauge rifle, 3 handguns, blah, 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 blah. So I just can't go there.
Yeah, no, I can see why. That book really flagged up what was coming, and I'm really hoping that for Emma isn't doing the same, but I have a horrible feeling that it really is. Now, I made a reference to it being science fiction. Is it, or is it reality?
Well, you see, I think I've got Don DeLillo to thank for this, because he made a statement which was something like, what happens when the world itself becomes a fiction? And I think what's happened today in our highly advanced capitalist societies is we've let science fiction take over the speculative economy. So Silicon Valley is basically running the world economy based on 1970s, 1980s science fiction. There's so much of this talk of, artificial general intelligence, are we close to it? Are we not? Artificial super intelligence. It fills up the news. It now determines policy in America. There was a mandate from Trump the other day saying that they're going to put artificial intelligence in schools. So at that point, you're starting to get sci-fi's invading reality. So I swear that I'm still a realist when it comes down to fiction, but the reality itself has moved substantially towards science fiction, and that unfortunately we're living in a time where fiction's taking over.
So what happens in this book is this very, very talented young scientist agrees to have a chip put in her brain, and basically it takes her over. No spoilers here. We know from the beginning that she's dead, or we think she's dead. How close is that to what's happening? Because we're also here. You're also writing about nanotechnology, and
Yes.
there isn't a day that goes by without us seeing new breakthroughs in science because of nanotechnology.
Indeed.
We know that Elon Musk has his Neuralink company. Tell us about those and how closely they mirror what's going on in your book.
Okay, so there's 6 companies in the world that are doing brain chip technology, which is, and 3 of them are doing invasive brain chip technology, which they cut a hole in your head, they stick some trodes or receptors into your brain. One is Elon Musk's Neuralink, another one is Jeff Bezos' company. So there's a race here. Technological races to the bottom are quite common. There's a race to be the first to get a fully integrated brain chip that can be with you long term in your brain. Some of these things are very short term. Musk is probably leading the world in brain chip technologies just now with Neuralink, and that's being used to give some power and some control back to paraplegics. So there's the possibility of them moving a cursor on a screen and composing pre-composed emails, and there was one case recently of a person who was given back a voice after having lost their voice through an injury, because they can use a Neuralink chip to scroll down a bunch of variables and click on them, and then a voice will speak for them. So at the moment, it's all therapeutics that this is involved in, but so it's helping people who've lost the ability to walk, to speak, etc. And there's only about 10 people have been fitted with the brain chips. But Elon Musk's prediction is that it's going to be 10 this year, it's going to be 100 next year, and in 10 years' time it's going to be 1 million people. And what he really wants is to move from therapeutics towards human augmentation. So that's giving people extra powers, which is what we see in the book for Emma. Emma's able to upload new kinds of skills that she's never had before. She's able to, by just using the brain chip in her head, she's able to move robotic limbs across the room from herself. She's able to acquire skills in things like musical instrument.
And language.
And language as well is the terrifying thing, when she can speak in languages that she doesn't understand. So I wouldn't like to put a date on how close we are to that, and how much of what Musk talks about is just pure hype to get funding for his business. But I do think that one of the things that the book flags is that for us to get to the dream of the augmented post-human or transhuman person, there will be human lab rats who have to be treated experimentally, and they will die. So whether that's like the 1,500 animals that have already died in the Neuralink experiments, these are pigs and monkeys mostly, in Elon Musk's, I've double fact-checked this to make sure, 1,500 animals have died in the brain chip experiments so far. So for Emma's saying, well, since human augmentation is the long-term goal, where are these human test subjects going to come from? And, Emma, in her research, as she's fitted, she discovers that a lot of this has been going on in the third world. There's been tests done on human subjects which are deemed perhaps less important by the big corporation or more expendable.
There's a line here, you write, the simplest organisms on the planet are wired to detect threats and to protect their lives. If an artificial intelligence does not learn to fear, then it will simply remain a complex pattern recognition machine. AI must live in fear of its own death. I thought that was really, really interesting, and we're teaching it that.
Well, you see, one of the concerns about AI is that because we live in such a positivistic culture and we talk the self-helpy speak to ourselves about being positive all the time, we think we're teaching AI to be good and nice like we want to be. But a future AI could learn about our human subconscious and can start to read between the lines of what we're not saying. And it might have an entirely different picture of us from the one that we see of ourselves. It might see us as a bunch of murderous apes. And as soon as it starts to feel it's, that we can shut it down, then it gets a sense of how distressed we are by being shut down. It would become a defensive AI, and it would do everything it could to try to stop us.
You say how it might turn out that, for people, the AI could choose its taste in music, the use of safe and inclusive words. AI would pre-select who they date, who they'll vote for. People will earn virtual money. They'll rate each other's manners and behaviour on their social utility credit apps, which we kind of do already.
We kind of do all these things already. We're getting there.
Adding more data to the global internet of all things, feeding the AI so it grows deeper within us all. Just how frightened should we be?
Well, I think we should stop wearing these trackers on our wrists. For example, I was coming down the road the other day, and there was this chap ran up behind me, and there was this voice, a woman's voice, saying 30 more steps till you've finished your physical workout for today. And he was jogging, and he came to a stop. And then it announced, there was a loudspeaker in his pocket, it announced, "Congratulations, you have just," I'm an American voice, of course, "you've just reached your personal fitness goal for today." And then it played his favourite song. And I just thought, what is that, all these instances in our lives, we are giving these quite limited AIs control over what's a sort of optimized human being model. We're voluntarily turning ourselves into the Borg, in a sense, where our health and fitness are what we eat, and even who we interact with and who we date. We've become dependent on those technologies. It started off as a novelty, and then we become dependent on it.
And what we buy. And of course, Jeff Bezos already has that information through Amazon.
Indeed.
And we can see how big tech is running politics in the United States, certainly. And big decisions being made here in Britain too.
Oh, indeed. With the government willing to throw copyright and protection of artists under the bus so that the British government can try to jump on the bandwagon of AI. I think that's appalling, and I do my best to try to fight that online.
You talk in the book, and I don't know whether this is true or not, about a Chinese company inventing ghost bots that basically resurrect the dead.
Yes, it's absolutely true. It's a very popular thing. The only problem with... So what happens is, if you're dying, which I hope you're not.
We all are.
We all are, indeed. So you can contact a company and say, "I've got 3 months to live. I would like to leave behind an AI avatar." So the AI avatar will be a bit like the very popular ABBA thing that's happening in London just now. You can see ABBA projections on stage. So they'll come and they'll film you for, about an hour, and they'll ask you a bunch of questions, and they'll get you to say certain words, and they're recording you from 3 cameras. You make a 3-dimensional representation of you. They program all of that material into an AI, and they can create a projection of Georgina that will live beyond your life, and it will speak to your kids. So your kids and your family members can speak to this deceased person who's there after they've passed away. The problem with it is all these AIs hallucinate, and they're only 70% accurate anyway. So your AI grandma's not going to know all the things that your real grandma knew about you. So if your real grandma, called you Honeyboodle, it's not going to know that. It might know her favourite songs if it has checked up on her Spotify account or whatever, but it's going to be 70% your granny.
Yeah.
I mean, the main problem with this is it gets in the way of genuine grief and mourning, the 5 stages of grief.
And you talk about that in the book. He's writing or recording messages to his dead daughter saying, "We no longer have rituals of respect for the grieving in this liberal land, only the expectation that you must get over it as soon as possible so you can go back to the smiling facade of death avoidance and being positive." I just thought that absolutely nails it. Now, the book is funny too. There are a lot of dad jokes.
Yes, very bad dad jokes.
There are a lot of puns in it. I was absolutely fascinated by the structure, because you do this initially through the eyes of a young editor whose really only expertise is that she's done some self-help books.
That's
before.
right. Yes. Yeah.
And that part of it's really funny. Just explain how you came to that structure and how it works.
Well, I seem to love this kind of tripartite structure where you have three things. So three things fighting with each other. So I first came across this structure in a book of mine called Menage, which was about a menage a trois. And it was 9 chapters split into 3 sections each. And so I do love that sort of layering thing that goes on. So, I mean, I think in terms of... So we have an editor, we have Josh, the father, who's going to kill himself in 30 days' time and destroy the CEO of the corporation that implanted his daughter with the brain chip. That's his 30-day countdown, so the chapters are 30, 29, 28 days, etc. But these are broken up with his memories and with some of her recordings as well. Why do this? Why make it more complicated for myself? I think it's because... I think that for a book to really get its fangs into you, it's got to have like 3 layers, not just 30 chapters, but 3 layers. And so I think there's like plot and character is one, and then there's the world they inhabit, and then there's the subconscious, which is trying to undo the whole damn story all the time, just as human subconscious makes us self-sabotage sometimes. So I think part of what makes the book compelling for me as a writer and reader is the fact that even though Josh has set himself these 30 days, it could go wrong at any moment because his subconscious is loading him with all these memories and all this guilt over how he could have possibly saved Emma's life, and he's investigating all those moments in time that he missed an opportunity to do so. So, I think that's that. It's more the 3 layers. I love that in a book.
I mean, just for me, this book really did seem to be about the meaning of life.
Yes.
And just so valuable, but also completely terrifying. I have to say that my producer, Steph, and I both feel like we've donned tinfoil helmets.
You may have to yet.
All I can say, Ewan Morrison, is thank you so much. And everybody, you must read For Emma. It's published by Leamington Books and it's out now. You've been listening to Meet the Writers, thanks to the producer Steph Chungu, who also edited this episode. And you can download this show and previous episodes from our website or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thank you for listening.